fans? It's your boy Luke here for another course breakdown, this time at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. We're heading back to Pebble Beach, one of the more iconic golf courses in all of the PGA Tour, which has me really excited to go ahead and break this down. Yes, there are 3 courses this week, not just Pebble Beach, so going to be talking about the Monterey Peninsula Shore Course and Spyglass Hill. But let's first touch on last week, which was super exciting in its own fold. Luke List coming through for the win over there at Torrey Pines. A very deserving champion, Mr. Ball Striking, the captain of Team No Putt, finally came through for a win. He had a few close finishes, a playoff loss to JT, a few other top fives where he really threatened first place. And to see him come through, first off, really felt good for him. I haven't actually felt that good for a player in quite some time. And it's not like he was one of these massive breakthrough wins, right? No one was expecting that. Nobody was talking about how Luke List was going to go out and win, needed to go out and win. I think there's a lot of other people on that pedestal ahead of him, but when it came through, it really felt good. I haven't felt like that in quite some time. I think when Jordan Spieth won for the first time in a while, it was one of those moments where you really felt good for the guy, but it was one for golf Twitter, let's say that. Everyone was really rooting for him. It was a core pick for me in my DFS lineups. No investment in the outright market, but plenty of people out there in the community, plenty of people I saw on Twitter were able to hit on that. So good on all of you for doing that. Of course, it was just a hit for the community in general, somebody that a lot of us have backed over the years. And overall, Torrey Pines, he has a way of crowning the really most deserving champions, right? With the ball striking prowess there, just a major venue. That's what you get at Torrey Pines, and that's also what we're going to get this week at Pebble Beach, the home of this week's showdown. With major championship history, just like a Torrey Pines, it also has a reputation of crowning first off breakthrough winners, and some of the best champions in the history of the sport have won here. It'd be great to have Pebble for all 4 rounds this week. Of course, I do think they should have a second event here at Pebble Beach without the Pro-Am, a time of the year where we have more day to actually play a full field event for 4 rounds. Reason why we're only playing on 3 different golf courses, only at Pebble Beach on Sunday, is due to the daylight, right? They can't fit in all 4 rounds with 156 players this time of year. So perhaps coming back towards the end of summer, an invitational type of event could be the type of thing to do, but I digress. That is not the case this week. So for this preview, we will be covering all 3 golf courses. So a little bit more emphasis, of course, on Pebble Beach because we'll be there for 2 rounds. Anyone that makes the cut after the first 54 holes will head over to Pebble Beach Golf Links. We'll be playing at the Monterey Peninsula Shore Course, and of course Spyglass Hill. So we'll be covering those courses in full detail, and of course giving our key stats and comp courses at the end. The goal here is to get you guys completely prepared for this week's tournament, whether it's the field, the tournament specifics like the cut line, if there's going to be a cut, and what we're expecting, whether is there any rule changes. Of course, with the Pro-Am version of this, the amateurs in play, a little bit to touch on there as well. And of course, from a course perspective, whether you're doing any bets, DFS, the goal here is to have you completely prepared to do your own research. There's usually a lot to comb through, but I've gone ahead, put all of that information together here in a digestible format to hopefully have you guys feeling a little bit more prepared afterwards. So with that being said, let's go off and start off this video with a little bit of a breakdown of the format for this week and some of the tournament specifics. So we're back to the Pro-Am format, which is going to be both exciting and annoying for some, both players and fans alike this week. If you're not familiar, there are going to be amateurs playing alongside the pros this week. This is the more famous Pro-Am tour because there's a lot of celebrities that are in this field, whereas at the American Express, it was more business executives, people that bought packages, earned the right to be playing in that Pro-Am, that type of thing. There's a lot of legit celebs in this field. So first off, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. If he would have won that playoff game against the Chiefs, probably wouldn't have been here. But guys like Larry Fitzgerald, Steve Young from the NFL as well, plenty of other actors, celebrities, athletes from across plenty of different sports going to be teeing it up. So there's going to be some comedians. It's going to be funny at times. You're going to see a lot of slow rounds as a result, though. Probably 6.5 hour rounds because you have to be dragging these amateurs along. You're going to be dealing with 2 pros per group, also an amateur paired with each. And then after the 54 holes, there will also be a cut line for those amateurs. So there won't be a million amateurs out there on Sunday. We're not going to have to worry about that. It'll be allocated 1-to-1 between the amateurs and, of course, the pros. In terms of the pro format, a 54-hole cut, like we alluded to in the introduction, much like we saw at the American Express, pros will play one round on each of the 3 golf courses: Pebble Beach, the Monterey Peninsula course, and Spyglass Hill. They'll do the cut line, go back to Pebble Beach for the Sunday round, and crown a champion. Now, overall, this event plays relatively easy, right? And that's even though Pebble Beach tends to be a difficult golf course. First and foremost, at this time of the year, the rough isn't quite as lush. So whenever they play championship level events, whether it's the US Open, PGA Championship, it plays under much more difficult circumstances. Typically much longer rough. They play it as a par 71 rather than a par 72, which makes a huge difference when it comes to the scoring. So over the years, we've seen winners anywhere between 22, 23 under par, and 12 under par. That would be the highest score we've seen for quite some time. That was Jimmy Walker, I believe 8 years ago. So you're looking at a relatively scoreable golf course, particularly over there at Monterey Peninsula, one of the more scoreable golf courses in all of the PGA Tour. But Spyglass Hill, very sneakily, one of the more difficult tracks that players will play the entire calendar year. So something that we're going to have to keep an eye on there. There is a good little bit of variance between these golf courses. So when we're breaking them down, especially when we're playing Showdown later this week, going to be a lot to pay attention to. So much like we saw at the American Express, a course like La Quinta played much significantly easier than the rest. That is going to be Monterey Peninsula this week. So if you're looking to play Showdown, that's definitely going to be the target there. In terms of a field this week, we do have a little bit of a weaker field. We do have that Saudi event out there where a lot of the world's top players will be teeing it up this week. We still do have some studs. They do include last year's champion, which is of course Daniel Berger. We do have Jordan Spieth, Patrick Cantlay, and Justin Rose, who's on a blazing stretch of form, rounding out the field. And a couple other notables include, and a personal favorite of mine, Min Woo Lee, a European Tour standout who's been on absolute fire of late. He's had 3 top 10s in his last 5 starts. He also has a win a few months ago. Somebody who on the European Tour is arguably one of the best players over there now. And obviously we've seen quite a few guys come from that tour over to the American side and have some success. So the eye test on Min Woo Lee is off the charts. I mean, the guy just looks like an incredible talent. So really looking forward to this performance this week. I think it's a golf course that should set up well for him. We also have guys like Matt Fitzpatrick, Will Zalatoris teeing it up. So even though it's not quite the field that it could be, we still have plenty of top-end talent here. So I'm excited for this event. Even with the Pro-Am going on, it just means we have more golf to watch, right? The television coverage going to be a little bit longer. We're going to get some primetime coverage over the weekend. And I'm overall looking forward to this. Some of the players might not be looking forward to the Pro-Am portion of this, but we don't have to deal with that, right? If we were there, we'd be the amateurs holding these players back. So either way, looking forward to it. In terms of a historical cut line, like I said, it happens over 54 holes. So you're looking at a cut line usually well under par, at least 3 under par, typically closer to 5 to 7 under par. So you guys are going to have to be out there scoring, or they're going to get cut after 3 rounds, as for what we saw at the American Express. All right, we're going to go ahead and start off with an analysis of the Pebble Beach golf links. The main course for this week, where we'll be at for Sunday to crown the champion. It's a par 72, extremely short at just 6,972 yards, a Jack Neville design back in the early 1950s. Poa Anua greens all around the venue. Very small greens, just 3,500 square foot per average. The rough's ryegrass, the fairways are bent grass. And again, this is a fair course. It's hard, but scoreable if you have your game. So we usually see it as the average difficulty course, the one that's in the middle of the 3. Spyglass Hill, typically the most difficult. Monterey Peninsula, by far the easiest of the 3, even though it's just a par 71. But Pebble Beach, when the wind gets up there, it can be almost harder than Spyglass Hill. So it does have a little bit of that wind factor to it. All of the holes here exposed to the wind. It's a true link style golf course. A lot of hard surrounds on these greens. You can play the ball on the ground if you'd like to. When the wind kicks up, you almost have to play the ball along the ground here on this link style golf course. And because it's only 6,972 yards, almost anyone can score here, right? Guys like Snedeker have won. We've seen players like Ted Potter Jr. win this golf tournament multiple times. Distance here is not a prerequisite. We saw that last week at Torrey Pines. Pretty much had to be a long hitter to be in contention. To at least win the golf tournament, you had to be a bomber. Can make the cut at the very least, getting by, having a really solid round on the North course, but to compete over the weekend at Tour, you had to have distance. Not the case this week, which is great. So that's why it's short but fair. Because the greens are so small here at Pebble Beach, even the best ball strikers in the world are going to miss their fair share amount of greens. 3,500 square feet is about 1,500 square feet less than the PGA Tour average. The deepest green here at this golf course is 26 meters deep, which is not much at all. I mean, you can skip golf shots that far, particularly with some of your long irons. So the guys that can hit the ball extremely high with some of their long irons, particularly for these par fives, are going to have a huge advantage. It's the only way to hold these greens. Getting up and down is going to be the recipe for success for most of these players. As first off, like I said, even the best iron players are going to be missing their fair share. And on these par fives, unless you have that super high long iron shot in the bag, not going to be a huge benefit. That's why guys like a Jason Day that seemingly don't have the best course fit when you take a look at most of their shots gain metrics have had success here. There's one thing Jason Day can do, it's hit a high looping draw, and that is the exact shot to take home a golf course like Pebble Beach. So we've seen him have success here over the years. He's kind of the archetype for a player that we're looking for. Like I said, it is exposed to the elements, so we do need to be taking weather into consideration. Over at Monterey Peninsula, where there is much more protection from the wind, many of the holes go into a heavily wooded area where you pretty much don't have to worry about wind at all. There is no protection here at Pebble Beach. Every single hole is going to be a factor, particularly if it's blowing over 10 to 15 miles an hour. So something to consider for playing on Showdown. Typically, in terms of difficulty, like we said, this is about an average difficulty golf course. You're going to see a scoring average rate around half a shot under par. So if you have your game, it's a fair course. You can go out, easily shoot 4 or 5 under par. We saw Daniel Berger win this golf tournament last year, shooting 7 under par on the last day. And you can only get to 7 under par if a golf course is fair. So have your irons on point, make a few putts here. You can definitely take it low. But if you're a little bit awry with those irons, you don't have that around the green play there. There are a ton of huge numbers out there, 4 or 5, even 10 under par, 10 over par for some of these nuclear rounds. So make sure you keep that volatility in mind. And now for Spyglass Hill. This is a par 72, 7,041 yards, and by far the most difficult of the circuit here. It is a Robert Trent Jones Sr. design, one of the more difficult archetypes that we've seen over the years here. An architect that loves to use slope, usually elevates most of his greens, and really makes it fits for players to get up and down. And that's exactly what we see at Spyglass Hill. Some of the more difficult to read greens in all of the PGA Tour. The 3-putt average is one of the highest rates here of any golf courses on tour, and that is despite not having the biggest greens. You're dealing with relatively small greens, not quite as small as what we see over at Pebble Beach. But 3-putt rate is through the roof. That's because we're dealing with POA NUA surfaces, which add a lot of variance inherently, the fact that they grow throughout the day, but you're also dealing with a ton of undulation. So even the best putters in the world not going to have a ton of success at Spyglass Hill, which really limits a player's upside. Even if they have their ball striking on point, not likely to make enough putts to get by here. The career low round at Spyglass Hill is a 64, whereas at Pebble Beach and Monterey Peninsula, people have gone to 60 or even 62 before. At Spyglass Hill, those ceiling type of rounds aren't there. So when we're playing Showdown or taking a look at a single round sample size, probably not looking to go low here. More trying to keep it together, get something in 2, 3, maybe 4 under par if you're having a really solid day, and try to get to Monterey Peninsula where you can get a real low round out there, or of course Pebble Beach that is more than fair enough to take low. Let's talk about what makes this golf course difficult. Like we said, we have the POA NUA greens, but they are raised surfaces, a good 10 to 15 yards at times. A lot of them are just propped up on hills that not only exposes them to the wind, but also adds a ton of undulation, a lot of it man-made by Robert Trent Jones Sr. himself to add difficulty. And the pin locations are key here as well. There are bowls that can tend to make the golf course play easier, but what we've seen from the PGA Tour staff is more devilish locations where they're putting them on ridges, where you see a ton of free putts. That's why we've seen some really high scores at this golf course over the years. So here, we're trying to make sure that we can take good putters. If you're going to have to take anybody from Spyglass Hill, especially if you're playing for a first round leader or for the low score of the day or something like that on the betting market, you want to make sure that they are a damn good putter on Poa Nua. That's probably the number one key stat for this golf course. But overall, in terms of winning this golf tournament, I'm trying to pick a winner from a 4-round sense. This is probably the least important round, right? You're just hoping that your guy gets it in right around par, maybe 1 or 2 under to keep some momentum going. But with these raised surfaces, with the really tricky around the green play, also with the undulation making your putts even from 4 to 5 feet difficult, you're really just looking to get by here. And now for the shore course over at Monterey Peninsula Country Club. This is a par 71, nearly 7,000 yards at 6,957. A Bob E. Bowdcock and Jack Neville design. On Poa Nua greens, ryegrass, rough, bent grass fairways. Very similar to what we saw at those other 2 venues. But this golf course, the reason it's much easier is a country club type of course. You have massive fairways, greens that are much larger than what we see at the other type of designs, and much less undulation on these greens as well. So overall, you can keep yourself in play. It comes down to just hitting solid irons, making a ton of putts, and you're looking to try to get this thing to 5, 6, maybe even 7 under par. You could see an 8, 9, 10 under par round out there this week, particularly if some of the wind stays down. And like I said earlier in the video, this golf course also gets quite a bit of protection from the wind. About 6, 7 of the golf holes are completely protected by heavily wooded areas. Then you have at least 5 to 6 other golf holes on the golf course that also offered at least slight protection from the wind. So you look at low scores here, pretty much regardless of the weather conditions, which means for windy days on Showdown, you should already be looking at this golf course because it's so much significantly easier. On windy days, you probably only want to be targeting guys that are playing the Peninsula course. Overall, this is a relatively easy golf course, not much to speak about, more of a resort style golf course than anything. Greens that are low to the ground. There's not huge lips on any of the bunkering here. So even some of the worst around the green players can totally get by. The distance isn't there either. It's still under 7,000 yards. So even though it is a par 71, distance is far from a prerequisite. You're really just looking for guys that can hit their wedges well, that can make a ton of putts on Poa Nua. So much like these other 2 golf courses, with slightly more emphasis on birdie or better percentage. You want guys that are going to be aggressive, actively look to get to 7 to 8 under par because there's an art in doing so, right? We've been told that on the PGA Tour. There's guys that are just wired to go low, actually get into the low 60s that are able to do that consistently. And while they may mix in some of the higher rounds, scores of 3, 4 over par because of that same aggressiveness. For Showdown, we're looking to capture that top end upside. So it being the easiest of the golf courses, despite being a par 71, by far the best course for fantasy purposes and what you should be focusing on from a 1-round standpoint. All right, and now for our key stats for our analysis this week. And number 1, we're going to have shots gained approach, which should not be a surprise to anyone. This is by far the most important statistic from week to week on the PGA Tour. And at a golf course like Pebble Beach, which is where most of our emphasis will be this week, accuracy and precision is going to be key. We have the smallest greens on the PGA Tour, but you have plenty of bunkering around these greens as well. Something I didn't mention before is it has the most bunkers recorded pretty much that these players will ever play. Is more than St. Andrews, certainly more than any other PGA Tour course. The only other venue that I'm sure gives it a run for its money is going to be Kiowa Island, and that's because they haven't counted all those bunkers. There's a few other courses in England, some of those link-style golf courses, that is also the case. But at the same time, bunkering yourself, not going to be the key to success. In order to go low, actually win at Pebble Beach, your approach play has to be top 5 or even number 1 in the field. That's what we've seen for these last 15 to 20 winners. All of them have been excellent with their irons that week. So not a surprise. That is something that is usually the case for pretty much every single tour event. But what's especially interesting about Pebble Beach with its lack of distance is that some of these shorter iron distances get much more usage. We're looking at 15 to 20% more extra shots in the 100 to 125 yard range, making it by far one of the biggest differentials that we ever see on tour. And if we take a look at the sub 100 yard bucket, you're looking at a whole 15% more usage. Almost all of that, the 35 to 40% usage, is coming from the 150 to 175 yard bucket, also the 175 to 200 yard bucket, making your middle irons almost completely irrelevant this week, all right? Unless you're mishitting balls off the tee, you should have scoring wedges in hand for almost every single hole. Something to note though is that even with the emphasis on the wedge play, we still do see long irons come into play. They're about 5% more important this week than usual from the 200 plus yard range. So that isn't something that we completely throw out the bag. It's more of the middle irons being extremely not important, where the scoring wedges being extremely important. So make sure to keep that in mind with the shots gained numbers. If you're taking a look at it per the buckets, which is by far the most efficient way to break this down, taking a look at those scoring wedges is going to be the way to do so. Next up, we're going to have shots gained around the green. At Pebble Beach, missing greens is a regularity, even for the best players on tour. Because we have greens that are just 3,500 square foot on average, you're going to have to get up and down, and getting up and down isn't going to be easy. You're not going to have a lot of room to spin shots up to the green. There's going to be lush rough around most of these greens as well, particularly at the Pebble Beach course. So you're not really going to be looking at getting spin on the ball. Getting up and down, this is one of the hardest golf courses to do so. Not quite as tough as what we saw at Torrey Pines. That Kikuyu rough they get towards Southern California is a much more difficult beast to hit out of than some of this ryegrass that we find over here at Torrey Pines, but still a challenge of its own. We routinely see winners at Pebble Beach that have an immaculate short game. If we take a look at some of the recent champions, maybe except for Daniel Berger, that does have a shaky around the green game. Guys like Snedeker, Jordan Spieth, champions the whole way back to 2014 have routinely been in the top 30 on tour with shots gained around the green. So you like to see that. You want guys that are going to be able to save themselves, particularly because they're going to put themselves in so many bad situations. The golf course where around the green is the most important is by far Spyglass Hill. Like I said before, we have raised surfaces there, tons of undulation from Robert Trent Jones Sr. So if you're missing greens at Spyglass Hill, you're going to be in a lot of trouble if you don't have an immaculate up and down game. And now lastly, we have shots gained putting, particularly on Poa-Nua. Going to be most of our emphasis this week will be on Poa-Nua. And much like last week, we saw Poa-Nua specialists littered across the top of that leaderboard. Whether it's Luke List, who ended up winning the golf tournament, who was one of the biggest differentials between his baseline and his Poa-Nua stats of anybody in the field that week. The greens just tend to be specialist oriented. They have a lot of volatility to them. They tend to grow throughout the day, tend to slow down, tend to get a little bit more bumpy. So the guys that are used to that effect, that are able to take that into consideration, have had a lot of success. You know, guys like Phil Mickelson that are prolific winners on the West Coast. Guys that maybe aren't prolific winners, but that have done a lot of winning on the West Coast, like a Max Homa, both of them on the West Coast. Guys like Patrick Rogers, who routinely makes the West Coast swing on one of his better times of the year. Doug Gim, who's had his best performances out here. They're just guys that are wired to putt on the surface, right? They did it growing up. They went to college out here. Sahith Theegala, right, at Pepperdine ended up putting the heck out of the ball last week. We saw that coming as well. There's just guys that take this apart. So we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of that. It's one of the 3 to 4 week stretches on the PGA Tour where we're actually able to take advantage. So we want to make sure we're doing so. Guys like a Brandt Snedeker, who have won this event in the past, are some of the best putters historically on Poa-Nua ever. So there's just so much good juju going with these Poa-Nua putters. And JT last week was a prime example of somebody who benefited from that effect. So it wasn't just Luke List, who clearly in winning that golf tournament saw an effect there, but even JT, who's a slightly better putter on Poa-Nua than any other surface on tour, finally snapped it around last week and started gaining strokes on the greens. Even though he obviously had that Saturday afternoon, Sunday meltdown where he didn't take home the win, it was great to see him in contention. Great to see him making some putts there on Wednesday and Thursday. And that's the kind of effect you're going to see this week as well, right? The guys that are a little bit more aggressive with the putter, that tend to get the ball past the hole, are going to start draining a few more putts. The ball's going to start to bump towards the hole a little bit more often than not. Because the greens are a little bit slower than most, particularly towards the end of the day, these aggressive putters get away with it, right? The ball doesn't roll as far past the hole, and then you get some of those bumps that make the ball go in the hole rather than bouncing past the hole. So overall, using historical data for this, we're going to be taking a look at guys that have a better average on Poa-Nua than they do for other surfaces. These are the guys that we know will be going in with confidence on these surfaces. And of course, taking a look at our top 2 key metrics as well, right? Shots gained approach going to be king this week, but making sure that we have guys that can still get up and down, also going to be relatively important as well. And now for some comp courses. This is going to be for all three golf courses, more of a composition when it comes to these comps. But first off, we have the Sea Island Seaside course. Let's go ahead and start off with the obvious. They are link style golf courses, both meant to be played along the ground, particularly if it gets windy. Both are also coastal, relatively short golf courses. So a lot of comparisons to be made here. The guys that are playing well with their wedges tend to play well at the RSM Classic, and that's also what we've seen over here at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Guys that are good with that 100 to 125 yard range tend to be the guys that win this event. So using that as a comp, both from a leaderboard perspective and of course the shots gained perspective, going to be a vital part of my process here. The wind aspect, also something that we can draw conclusions from, as many a years the wind at the RSM Classic ends up being a storyline. Next up, we have Port Royal Golf Course. That's the home of the Bermuda Championship over there on the island of Bermuda. Much like the RSM Classic, the main difference between these two venues and of course what we're getting at Pebble Beach are the grass types. We get the Poa Nua, pure Poa Nua surfaces over on the West Coast for the Bermuda Championship, and the RSM Classic, pure Bermuda surfaces. So huge difference between them. You get the grain aspect of Bermuda, you have the volatility of Poa Nua. So that's going to be the main differences here. So you can't make a one-to-one comparison between those events and what we have here at Pebble Beach. But from the ball striking perspective, Port Royal gives you exactly what Sea Island does. Lots of wedges, relatively short golf course, going to prioritize a lot more accuracy off the tee rather than distance, and a lot of conclusions that can be made between those leaderboards and that what we are going to expect this week. And now finally, what we saw last week, the Torrey Pines North course, not the coastal, harder south course that's almost 7,800 yards. I'm talking about the course that's right around 7,100 yards. Inland has a little bit of protection from the wind, but was also extremely scoreable. I think this is a great comparison to what we're going to get the Monterey Peninsula, where we have some holes that are protected from the wind, but some that are also exposed to the elements. Relatively short golf courses. We're going to look to get it to 6, 7, maybe even 8 under par if you have it all rolling. From a scoring perspective, both golf courses give you a similar feel and look. The driving, a little bit harder at a Torrey Pines North, also much more penal rough there. But in terms of the iron shots on the greens, the difficulty to read whatnot, very similar looks. Sure, I'd expect the scoring at Monterey Peninsula to perhaps be a little bit better than what we saw at the North Course, just due to the differences in those roughs. But from a off the tee standpoint, from an on the green standpoint, a lot of comparisons that we can make from there. That is all I've got for this week's course breakdown. Before you guys go ahead and get on out of here, go ahead and let me know in the comments what you think the winning score is going to be. Personally, I see great weather this weekend. At least that's what the forecast has for right now. So I expect it in the middle 20 under par, right? 22 under par is what I'm going to go ahead and take, but would not be surprised if they took it even further. This is a golf course that when wind lays down, there's not really any defense out here. If you're playing target practice with your long irons, more than capable of getting on a hot streak. One thing I wanted to include in the description of this video is links to 3 overhead flyovers of each of these golf courses. That's part of my analysis every week, is I like to take a look at a hole by hole breakdown. We see them on TV every single year, but golf courses like Spyglass or the Monterey Peninsula course that don't get quite as much TV coverage, I like to get a good idea and grasp for the layout, the shots that these players are going to be facing, the distances, how scoreable are these greens, do they have a ton of undulation, whatnot. If that's something that you want to include in your own process, highly recommend you go ahead and check them out. All 3 excellent, give you a real idea of how the golf course is going to play. The Pebble Beach one in particular, the one at the top, also narrated, gives you a good idea of what to expect from that perspective. But the ones that are just pure flyovers also give you a lot of value. So wanted to go ahead and put those down in the description. They're definitely something that I use for my analysis. And if you're looking to get even deeper into these courses, do a little bit of your own digging, which I enjoy doing myself. I'm sure some of you guys out there want to be doing that yourself. It's a good thing to add to your process. As for the content schedule this week, we're going to have our regular DFS content dropping this evening, a regular DFS live stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and showdown content throughout the weekend. So if you haven't already liked the video, first off, make sure you guys go ahead and do so. That way we know the content is for your liking, you guys like what you're seeing and want to see even more coming out in the future. But also make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of that content to come, whether it's for DFS, the live streams, the showdown stuff. We're going to have you completely covered for every event this year. Good luck with all of your lineups, guys. Hopefully you're off to a hot start of your week here on a Monday, and let's have ourselves a week.